Hi, I'm Jen Lemberger.
And I'm Greg Feitt.
We're the owners of Chaucer's Books, and
you're
watching
watching
Creative
Creative Community.
Community.
Welcome to the Creative Community. I'm your host, David Starkey, and my guests this time are Jen Lemberger and Greg Feitt. Welcome.
Thank you,
Thank
David.
you.
Yeah.
Local celebrities here, the new owners of Chaucer's Bookstore. I've been talking a lot to people about that because this is such an important institution to our community. 50 years is it going to be?
Yes.
Tell me about that first, with 50-year celebration.
So we've been planning a number of events. This is really a big, birthday for us, but also a celebration of the community. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the support of all of the folks over that time, buying our books. And so a lot of our events are free events. They're all free, and they're really celebrating storytelling and books. So we've had a poetry workshop, a nonfiction short story. We're having a community story time coming up, and after hours, spooky stories, and then our big birthday bash that we'll have where everyone will be invited, and it's a celebration of both the store's 50th and also the original owner's 80th birthday. So it'll be a dual celebration for that.
Talk a little bit about Mara, the original owner. She's obviously an important figure in our community, an important figure for both of you.
Yeah, we both worked for her.
Yeah, that's how we met, is working for her originally. And she's just been a real mainstay in the Santa Barbara literary community for 50 years, really. I mean, she bought the store as a smaller bookstore in 1974, and over the years turned it into what it is now. And she did that by intelligence and perseverance and just a real sense of what people want to read in Santa Barbara.
Right.
It was also, a pretty big deal. So 50 years, that means it was 1974. And so to be a female-owned business, a woman-owned business, particularly in the early 70s, was no small feat. And so to be able to also carry on that aspect of it and have not only the store continue to be locally owned, but also it's now veteran and woman-owned. And so that was a significant piece for us as well.
One of the things I love about the store so much is how deep the collections go. So for instance, as you know, I'm a poet. Your poetry selection is the best between Los Angeles and San Francisco, and maybe better than, well, maybe City Lights is pretty good.
City Lights is pretty good, yeah.
But it's just so darn good, and it's such a treat to go in there. I always promise myself that I'm going to buy a book before I leave, and I always do. But frequently that's the section I'll go to, even though I am given literally hundreds of books of poetry every year as a book reviewer. Always find something in there that I didn't know about that just seems to be, oh, that's perfect. So can you talk to me a little bit about curating those different sections? How does that come about?
I mean, Chaucer's is a really special and unique place in that aspect, and that's part of what makes it what it is and what we strive to build on and maintain.
Right.
It's one of the reasons that I worked there before we decided to buy the store, is just that it's a serious bookstore. I mean, we want to carry as much as possible and the right things as well, and to have what the community wants, which is wide and deep.
Right.
It's a lot of work to do that.
I'll bet it
for
is.
sure. I spend every day looking at books, whether to buy them or return them or rebuy them. And so it is a continual effort. It's a Sisyphean task, really. I mean, it's just, but it's worth it. It's worth it to have people come in the store like you just described and find that thing that they didn't know that they wanted and that they didn't know existed, perhaps.
Right.
And that totally makes it worth it for us.
It's a big deal in that, it's not just a marketing thing of like, this is how many volumes and
Right,
books
sure.
there are in the store. It really is about the community and what we might be able to provide. And in the library world, which is where I come from most recently before owning the bookstore, there is sort of a tenet that for every book there is a reader, and then for every person there is a book. And so to be able to carry that out and to try to make those connections and have that book that's going to find its reader, and then have people come into the store and find that book, it's why we do the work.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a certain amount of commerce involved, obviously, but there's also a kind of an artistic and intuitive leap into how do you get that, right? I mean, there's got to be some part of it.
I mean, one of the things Mari always described it as is when she was buying or curating the stock is that, not only is it based on data that we see, what's selling, what's not, but it's, she had an acronym for it called SWAG, and it's a scientific wild ass guess. So yeah, and that's kind of that was one of her ways of, describing how she did what she did, and that's still the way things happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so, wow, I mean, I'm just thinking of all the time that I've spent in there, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why the store is so beloved, is that people just can remember times of browsing through, running into friends. You guys have also been so kind to, and Mari, local authors over the years. Can you talk about that as an element of what you're doing?
If you've been to Chaucer's, you know our space, and in terms of having events, we're not a place, we're not going to be competing with arts and lectures and trying to get big names, and it really is a hometown bookstore. And a part of that for us is like, we're really lucky to be a bookstore in Santa Barbara, which has a phenomenal writers, authors, poets, and so the ability to not just have, smaller publishers, smaller writers, but really local hometown authors is not something that every bookstore gets to do. So that is a privilege that we have, and it's definitely something for us to take advantage of. There's no reason for us to not be highlighting. We just had a Marissa Voss, who it was her first book, and being able to have people who are locals and who are publishing their first book, that's a really meaningful thing to be part of.
Absolutely, yeah. Talk to me a little bit about, the bookstore is so important in the community. It's also important for the two of you because this is where you met, right? So in the history aisle, am I remembering that correctly? So tell me a little. I mean, there's much. Does you want to talk about the romance of Chaucer's?
So almost 20 years ago, we were both working there part-time, and I had kind of noticed this guy. And within Chaucer's, when you're a staff person, you have an area that you shelve. So, sports, poetry, nonfiction, hardcover, all of the various different things, all the 30 different places that you could possibly be shelving. And I specifically asked one of our other staff people if I could switch sections with him so that I could shelve part of the history aisle, because it's a double-sided big section, so I could be in the same section as this guy.
And I didn't even notice.
No, I didn't even notice. That point.
I did notice her, but I didn't notice the things she was doing.
Right.
Yeah. So we, I don't know, it was 7 or 8 months in, started dating. And then I actually moved away and went to grad school. And we somehow figured it out and stayed. So we stayed together the whole time. So we've been together, it'll be 20 years. 20 years in
I think
May?
it's 19 years next May.
19 years in May,
Yeah.
see?
Yeah, so.
You're the numbers guy.
Yeah, well,
He's the remember. He's the remember guy. Yeah.
So one of the things is when everyone heard, Chaucer's is going to be sold, I speak for everyone here in Santa Barbara, it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Who's going to buy it? Is it going to be the same? Or are they going to, run it into the ground? Is it suddenly going to be a bunch of bestsellers? And so talk about that process of trying to continue on with Mari's legacy, and also what new ideas that the two of you have?
Yes, I would say there are many people. So seeing the reactions and comments and folks had to the stories and information. There were, several comments of people being like, I audibly gasped when I read the headline. And then reading the story, people were like, oh, okay, great. And we love hearing that, because that's what we're hoping for is, it's the same Chaucers that you've known. There will be tweaks and changes, but we talked about the breadth and depth of books is going to stay the same. The support for local authors is going to stay the same. There are some adjustments we would really like to navigate and be able to support. We already do book fairs for local schools, but what are the ways that there are even further possibilities to support schools, to support organizations that are working with you, to support literacy organizations. If everybody has the ability and access to read, that's not only helpful for us as a business, clearly, but we know that there are social advantages, to being literate, one, in terms of your entire life, but then, the studies that show reading fiction increases your empathy. And so just exposing and providing access to books and literature and stories makes our whole community a better place for all of us to live.
So we've got the newer stuff going on. I'm curious too about what you're most concerned about keeping. You've talked about the breadth and depth, and is there one thing that we haven't spoken about yet that this is the quintessence of Chaucer's that we want to hang on to?
I mean, the breadth and depth of it is, for me, the main point, provided that the community supports it. I mean, that's what it wants, and that's what makes it really valuable to me too. I mean, I think I mentioned it again, and I don't want to repeat myself, but I mean, it's a place where I want to spend time, even if I didn't work there. And everywhere I go, I look for places like it, and I find them here and there, but not as often as I would like. And it's something that I really want to maintain. And then
I was curious about that. What are some of the bookstores that you all have been to that you think, oh, they're kind of in our echelon? I mean,
there's a variety, categories and echelons of bookstores is one thing, and then there's the feeling of a bookstore.
What are some of your favorite bookstores around the country?
I mean, City Lights is obviously a highlight.
I used to live in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo Books is one of my favorite places. I think they do a great job. The Last Bookstore is just, if you're...
It's wild.
If you're going for somewhere that is going to engage you in a different way, it's a good one. Our neighbors in Ojai, Bart's Books is a phenomenal, very unique place, but... I grew up going to Rakestraw Books in Danville, California, and also going to our paperback store, so Paperback Alley over in Goleta, is a very particular niche. And so I think there are lots of different places. I mean, we go into the Book Den all the time,
I spend a lot of money at the Book Den
well. So it is... the vibe for me, you can talk about the Strand and you can talk about Powell's, and they have their uniqueness and amazing abilities to exist in the way that they are. But, there's also something about, the crowded Mesa bookstore with its children's selection that is never going to be in the echelon as the Strand, but is still an amazing place to be.
Yeah.
My wife and I just came back from seeing the fall foliage in New England, and I noticed that you would stop in a town that had a good bookstore. The whole town has a good vibe. It's just, you just have a sense that, okay, this is a place where people think, they meet. That's the bookstore is part of the community, and it's just kind of an ineffable part of an urban space.
Yeah,
I guess.
and I think that to me, so thinking back to your question of the like, what is, your thing of keeping? And for me, it's the people, and that's both internal and external. Clearly, we need our customers and our community to even continue to exist as a bookstore, but in that way that you were just talking about of like, it is, we bought an institution. Like, it's not just another business that exists there, and that is again due to the support of the community. And then thinking of like the vibes of a bookstore and like being able to wander in and be there for amount of time and find the random things that you didn't know, like that's also up to staff.
Well, that was actually one of the places I was kind of wandering towards was that what you want to keep. And I know you mentioned earlier you have 20 full-time staff members who all have benefits.
Yes.
I mean, that's for a small business, A, and B, for a bookstore, that's got to be really unusual.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't know how unusual. I haven't. I don't inquire a lot at other places. But for what is effectively a retail operation, I do think it is a little bit unusual, and it's an expensive thing. But for us, it's worth it to both help our employees and to help the business as well. I mean, it's not purely altruistic. I mean, healthy employees are
just saying
benefit to us.
That's when you come in, you get to be with those people.
Right. And making sure that they have, within the constraints of a retail job. I mean, making sure that they have health insurance in, this day and age is
a real thing.
Is a real thing, and at least they have that security of being covered in that way. Yeah.
So the grad school that I left for when we first started dating, I actually got my master in public health. So like for me, that's also something that is never going to go away. Like it will be a conversation. It is, top of mind of being able to, keep staff, support staff, have that be, it's something you want to attract people, but as well to keep them at your store. Longevity of our staff. We have some staff who have been there just as long as Greg. Longer.
There's a couple of folks that have been there for there's one woman who's been there for almost 30 years.
Who was that?
Yeah, Barbara.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I was going to ask about, because I can think of people that have been here since I've been around in 2000, and then the people that seem to be relatively new. I'm curious about how you go about hiring someone, because you're not just checking out books, you also have to know something about books. What's that process like?
There's a duality to it, because there are folks that will stay 10, 15, 20 plus years, but we are also retail. Right. And so there is that balance where some folks are only going to be there for maybe 2 or 3 years. You hope that there's, some impact on longevity. But it is the reality of the business that we do as well. But I do think in the process of...
Yeah, I mean, we're really looking for readers first and foremost. Okay. And I mean,
so is that part of the interview?
It is, yeah.
We ask what people read.
Yeah, we ask what they're interested in and what they like the most and who their favorite authors are. And
are there any bad answers in that?
Depends on who's interviewing you.
Right. There really aren't any bad answers. The only thing is if we're interviewing 3 people and they all say they all like the same authors. It's kind of hard to choose between that, but.
And part of that is also, like I said, you have your section that you shelve, and hopefully within the store, sometimes you're shelving a section just because someone needs to do it, but we're also pairing people up with what they read.
As best as possible.
Our staff member who knows sci-fi fantasy has that aisle, because it's a connection for them, and clearly like having them be in the aisle that's meaningful to them.
Walking along and
they're going to be able to not only understand and know sort of who the authors are and how to shelve things and what is best to be face out, and they're also then going to know their section to be able to talk to customers that come in. And so not only do we ask what they read, it is the like, okay, who are we missing? Are we missing a poet? Are we missing, a poli-sci person? Are we missing what is that rounded staff of like, oh, we don't have a you. Like, do we
Can
need
you
to,
help us out?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious too about just the daily running of a bookstore. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of moving parts, but just
Slightly controlled chaos,
okay,
mostly.
Yeah,
Probably more mundane than folks think.
well, just take me through like a typical. Just what's today's? It was Tuesday, right? So like, if you were showing up at the bookstore, are you there right when it opens? So for the two of you, I'm really
Before.
curious.
I get
what's it
there,
like?
so I'm one of the book buyers, so I get there before the store opens. I mean, we're operating effectively
8
on
o'clock or
East,
something like that?
7 o'clock
Okay,
sometimes.
yeah.
We're operating effectively on East Coast time too, because all the major publishers are out there. And I look at everything that's sold the day before. I look at
Now you're sitting in your office with the computer?
Yeah, I'm sitting in my office.
The
I mean,
back.
I go through the store. I look at everything to make sure everything looks okay, and to kind of target
Before it
areas,
opens up, okay,
that may need help before the store opens up, that I can delegate or do myself.
Now, would that be like empty shelves or
Empty shelves, displays.
The front.
the front,
yeah.
which is very important?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then I sit there and most of the day, honestly, just buy books. And that's looking at everything that's sold the day before, filling customer orders as quickly as possible.
Right.
And looking at front list, looking at things that are out in the next season or the season after that, and trying to judge what we're going to need and what we're not.
How are you doing that, Greg? I mean, are you reading reviews? Are you looking at marketing projections?
It's a lot of catalogs that are put out by the publishers. It's almost all online now.
Right.
So that's its own unique challenge. But our sales reps are very well informed and do their research, and so they'll write markups on things, and I'll use my own judgment, our data, and just intuition to try and figure out what we think that people are going to want and what we're going to need to have to kind of remain who we are.
So in this imaginary average day, how many books would you buy?
Depends on the publisher, it depends on the day, it depends on the
On
time of
average.
year.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sending in orders to wholesalers and some of the major publishers on almost a daily basis.
Okay.
And then we're buying
Front
list from some of the major publishers. We're buying 1,000 books a day. We're receiving,
Wow.
1,000 books a
lot.
day.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
I think that's part of sort of the mundaneness, but also the like detail that people may not realize. They come in on the single day that
Right,
they're
yeah.
there, and they might come in 2 months later or a year later. But what you're seeing on that day is what happens every day. So Greg is back of store buying books, and then there's our receivers who are receiving all of these orders that were
As they come in
previously
through the
put
back
in.
there.
They come in through the back,
Yeah.
and then there's the labeling of the books, and then all of the staff have to take those books from the back to the correct sections, and then
And is
once
that
they're in
typically
the
happening
section,
during the working day?
whole day. So
all
when you're
day.
seeing the books on the floor, particularly smaller stacks, that's usually, I've gone to the back, all of our staff have gone back to the back dock, and like there are just piles of books that need to be put on the floor. And so you're bringing the 3 books to poetry, you're bringing the, hardcover fiction, you're bringing sociology, and then, okay, I'm the sociology section now.
So
I
it's
have
not
to
good.
go shelve all of the new books. So like that is a constant,
Yeah.
every day sort of thing.
And in the middle of this, all those staff members are answering phones, ringing people up at the registers,
Dealing with
customers in the
queries.
store,
Yeah.
and a variety of other tasks that they may they may have, or roles that they may fill.
Right.
So it's a busy place, and people do a lot of work there, and they may be doing things that are customer facing 1 hour, and then the next hour they're in the back doing something else. And so you have to kind of be a person that can do all of those things.
Right.
And we're a pretty unique crew of people, I think. I mean, all booksellers are. I mean, you have to be, it's a retail job, but it is also something that requires you to be very knowledgeable and very adaptable and flexible.
Well, and it's something in your heart too, because I mean, my house is just overflowing with books. So it's something that you just really must feel passionate about.
One of my favorite comments that a friend said, where I was like, "Oh, this is true." They were like, you now have the biggest library of all of our friends. And I was like, I guess technically true. I guess I do have the biggest collection.
And at least
of
it's not in our house.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
Not in your
That's
house,
a great
yeah.
benefit. Yeah.
We just have about 4 minutes left, but I want to go to you, Jen. So what's your kind of day like from morning to evening?
So right now I'm actually doing 2 jobs still. So I'll get to the bookstore full time in December. But right now, so we'll kind of be splitting things. I'll be front of house. Greg will be back of house. And so we'll go in at the same time. But when I go in the morning, it is event emails. So catching up with folks, clarifying attendance, the number of books, you know, the unloading, the coming in, and so all of the behind the scenes event work. We also have an entirely new 50th anniversary merch line, so like helping with that. So a lot of the stuff I do right now is behind the scenes, but I will be on the floor. So it'll be starting from 9 a.m.
We'll walk in.
Yes,
and there's Jen.
you'll be able to
Okay,
find
yeah.
me on the days that I'm working. And you know, we're open from 9 to 8, and it is an interesting thing of working with folks who, you know, sort of reasonably kind of will send an email or pop in at any time, but like we are also trying to not be there all the time and just have sort of quote regular working hours, trying to have that healthy split and benefit.
Trying is the operative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are usually there, you know, it'll be till mid-afternoon, but then there's also events, and so I'll be there from 7:30 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night until, you know, the event in the evening is done. But it is a lot of background emails to set things up, and then just being on the same thing that I just described is like, well, I'm going to go grab some books from the back dock and I'm going to put them out, and then I'm going to do some shelving, help some customers.
And those are long hours. I mean, those are. I mean, you know, there's Strand, Powell hours, or maybe a little bit longer. But again, just thinking about the smaller bookstores that I can call up, 8 o'clock's pretty late, and 9 o'clock's pretty early to be opening up. So I mean,
And every day.
yeah, and every day it's so. You can always get a book in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is also access too, and we want to make sure that the people who
are working all day
have the ability to come into the store if they want to after work, and not have it be limited by the fact that they have jobs.
Right.
So.
I only have about a minute and a half left. I'm going to ask you kind of a hard question, but I want you to answer it really quickly.
Okay.
So what is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who is about to either purchase a bookstore or just a business in a small business in general?
I would look for local resources. So we highly benefited from 2 organizations, so Women's Economic Ventures and SCORE. So Women's Economic Ventures in town is a Ventura, Santa Barbara specific, really looking at helping women in particular, but generally folks move from entrepreneur to business or raise their business profile. And so I think, you know, finding an org like that, and then SCORE is supported federally, and there are chapters in a variety of different places, and we're lucky to have a chapter in Santa Barbara, and we got mentors. And so you can, you know, you just fill out a form with very specific questions, and they pair you up. And we would not, if it wasn't for those 2, for Weave and SCORE, like they were absolutely instrumental in our purchase.
I'm going to have to let that be our final response. Thank you, Jen and Greg, so much for
thank you,
coming
David.
on.
Yeah, thank you.
The Creative Community is a co-production of TVSB in Santa Barbara and Caps Media in Ventura. I'm your host, David Starkey, and we'll see you next time.